Well, this show was kind of a drag. Hello everyone, this is ICABIS here and today we are going to talk about Secret Invasion episode 2. So remember last time when I said that it made no sense that Nick Fury didn't keep his promise and Skrulls are angry because of that? Well, good news, or maybe not good news. They try to build on top of that core problem. This episode starts with the past and Nick Fury hires a bunch of Skrulls for some grunt work, which adds a bit of a more reason for Skrulls to be angry at Nick Fury. Because I mean, in my opinion, it kind of makes sense. Nick Fury has a bunch of homeless refugees and he promises them a home and then says that you work for me and then maybe someday I'll find you guys a home. And then he continues on to not find them a home for 30 years. I mean, he could have easily found a home for the Skrulls had he actually tried for once. I mean, Captain Marvel can travel in space really fast. She could have easily found a habitable planet for the Skrulls. And if not Captain Marvel, then Tony could have used his technology to find a suitable home for the Skrulls. It was such an easy thing to do, and if you ask me, I'll just say that Skrulls could have easily lived on Mars. I know it's not Earth, but Skrulls are also not humans either. They could probably make Mars habitable. But the fact that Nick Fury doesn't find a home for the Skrulls for so long and instead uses them just makes him look kind of an arsehole. Also later on in the episode, Taylor says that he had sent a signal to the rest of his Skrull buddies, so now the planet Earth has been housing over 1 million Skrulls for what I assume is 30 years. And the Skrulls have also reached really high and powerful positions in politics, which makes you wonder why they just don't make a separate country or a city on some remote island for themselves to live on. They are really high on the political food chain and clearly have the power and assets to do so. They could live there incognito like Wakanda had for so long, and also that Namor guy that I honestly don't remember much about him to mention, but yeah, he could live off the grid, so I assume it wouldn't be too hard for the Skrulls to do as well. Also, I'm not sure if this show wants me to sympathize with Gravik or not, because honestly I can't do it. He's a class A terrorist and there is nothing more to it. Just like Freckles Jesus from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, there is nothing redeeming about him. They showed a flashback earlier in the episode and we get a bit of a backstory about him, which didn't really add anything other than the fact that Nick Fury made a promise in front of him that he'll get Skrulls their planet, which is an information that we kind of already know, so doesn't really add much to this core problem. Now I get that Nick Fury didn't keep his promise and that's on him, but Gravik going ahead and killing an upwards of 6,000 people in his terrorist attack in Moscow doesn't justify anything. He is an irredeemable turd who should be wiped off from this planet as soon as possible. And with all that said, you might assume that I would obviously be in Team Nick Fury, right? But no, I had to sound like a broken record, but Nick Fury didn't keep a promise that I established earlier in this video was really easy to keep. Speaking of Nick Fury, man, it's kind of sickening really how Marvel is absolutely destroying one character after another in their shows. I think they assassinated Wanda in her own show by making her a psychopath who is just processing her emotions by willingly trapping an upwards of hundreds of people in a small town who begged her to kill them instead of living there and be tortured in that hell. And the less we speak about Loki the better, and the list just goes on and on about the characters that Marvel ruined in phase 4. It feels like that the first 3 phases built up these characters and the later phases are dedicated to ruining these set characters. Now it's Nick Fury's turn. Now if you have been keeping up with Marvel, you would know that Nick Fury doesn't really show up too much in the movies, but whenever he is on the screen, he is an absolute badass. But apparently we can't have any badass male characters, so in this show, they get to deconstruct Nick Fury, put him on a table and chop off his balls. I never imagined the badass Nick Fury that I saw in the earlier movies would be sitting with Colonel Rhodes and talking about them being a minority and racism and how they had to work extra extra hard to get to be where they are. And well, Rhodes, being an absolute idiot, doesn't listen to Nick Fury telling him about the Skrulls and continues on to fire him. I never imagined Rhodes, who is barely an Avenger, would someday fire Nick Fury, who made the Avengers. But yeah, I guess that just happened. Even though Rhodes also mentioned that he got a briefing about these shape-shifting aliens 15 years ago, he still doesn't believe Nick Fury. It really feels like that every character is an idiot in this show, but then again I can't really blame the characters for being idiots because their intelligence is only limited by the intelligence of the people who wrote them, which isn't much either, so yeah. Anyhow, there is a lot of chatting in this episode that I don't think is worth talking about. Because this is a low budget show, so it won't show any action, just pad out time by having scenes that don't contribute much to the overall plot. I have to say I miss the way Marvel only made movies before. Like we used to get 2 movies per year, which was actually fine. I think it gave the filmmakers a lot of time to work through the story and make the final product as refined as possible. But now we get low budget TV shows comparable to CW, maybe even worse than that actually. There was another scene in this episode where Emilia Clarke checks some files on an old looking PC and finds out that Gravik is doing some experimentations. We see a familiar name, Groot, so that explains why Gravik had that Groot-like powers that we saw in the trailer of this show. One last thing to mention would be that, well, Nick Fury's wife is a Skrull, so there you go. Also, I think it is the same Skrull that we see in the flashback. Her name is Vara, and she was the one who introduced Gravik to Nick Fury. I think that's her just by looking at the shape of the Skrull mask, or just trying to make a connection here. Well, that was all this episode had, and I hope that they make the core conflict of this show a bit better in the future episodes, because they try to make it better in this episode with the flashback sequence where Nick Fury promised the Skrulls to find their home and then never fulfilled that promise. I just think that if this show doesn't explain why Nick Fury never fulfilled his promise, then it would really show the incompetence of the writers to resolve the issue that they've showed us, because Nick Fury cannot just up and forget to keep his promise. So that is one thing that I'm actually looking forward to in this show. With that said, this is all for this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, it's time for a goodbye.